Next up is Kevin Munnelly, who's the Senior VP of Technology and Platforms at Third Rock Ventures. Kevin leads the R&D to differentiate portfolio companies through machine learning across drug discovery. Previously, he spent 2 decades founding and leading life science startups as CEO and VP of Business Development, and also originally scientist. He has launched global systems for sequencing and DNA construction with exits including an IPO and 4 acquisitions. So without further ado, Kevin will be speaking to us today about data-driven company creation. And welcome, Kevin.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to speak today. It's has a lot of same themes of things you've heard earlier, a lot of very different things. So I'd just like to start with Mike. Like Mike, I have a lot of battle scars. Tons and tons of battle scars, especially from SAP integration. So I don't ever want to talk about that or do that again. But the message of reinvention and things like that is absolutely core and essential to surviving in this industry for as long as we have. The other thing is talks about data strategy, data cores. That's really an essential part of my presentation today, because without that, you're not going to do all the fancy fun stuff that the boards and everybody wants you to do. Like Kelly, so much importance is on asset prioritization, indication mapping, competitive intelligence to make the right decisions so that you can deploy or employ capital efficiently, right? Because a lot of this is capital allocation, buy, build, all these things. And the last thing with Leah, fascinating conversation. I think together we have multiple brains, or I have multiple brains. In my day that we used to call it ADD, but today, it really comes in handy. And the DMTA cycle is absolutely critical in this, and how we think about physical AI and how we think about the future of the human AI alliance is my word, the physical AI, human in the loop, lab in the loop, however you want to call it, how we're going to interact and really make a change in this industry and for the patients. So I'll start with what was supposed to be a graphic, and I'm sorry, my legal got in, so my presentation is completely different from what I actually intended to talk about today. But AI is not going to replace drug discovery. Absolutely not. What it is AI is going to enable people to do this better, faster, cheaper, and we'll be ultimately outperform those that actually don't use AI. So keep that in mind as we talk about today. The other thing, which is very different from the 3 people that talked about me, they have a lot of data. They have a lot of systems. They're converting things over. They're developing on top of giant data repositories. Think about starting from a white, clean slate, brand new company. What do? That's what I'll be here to talk to you about today. So with that as a backdrop, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Third Rock and how we're different, why we still push out companies, why we're on our 6th fund after 20 years. I'm going to talk to you a lot about technology and platforms, kind of with this in mind. And then I'll talk to you about some of the great impacts, some of the great challenges of AI ML. And then hopefully at that time, we'll be on to the next speaker because it'll be far more interesting. But let's start with State of the Rock. That's State of Third Rock. So we were founded about 20 years ago. We've raised about $3.8 billion of capital. We started 73 companies. We've had 25 regulatory approvals. So 20 years, our companies, including Horrendous, put drugs on the market to impact patients' lives. 25 in 20 years. So I think it's a great accomplishment for a company starting from zero. We did 30 IPOs, 15 acquisitions, 45 significant value collaborations with big pharma, small pharma, just big deals. But our total and focus is on the patients. That's our number 1 priority. So a little bit of history. Again, our 7th fund, we're usually creating somewhere, in the 10 to 15, companies per fund cycle. Sometimes we do, in fact, deploy passive capital where we'll make an investment or join somebody else. The majority of the time we build and we go from 0 to 1 and launch a company. And the way that we do that starts with our process. Our goal is to create sustainable companies with translatable innovation to impact the lives of patients. And through this, we have a process called Discover, Launch, Build, and Transform. And through that, it starts with group genius, ideation. How do you come up with a new idea? How do you evaluate it? How do you think about it? How does this become something that's actionable and a therapeutic molecule with an indication, with a clinical path that we believe is going to make money for our investors and for the patients? Well, not necessarily money for the patients, but impact patients. So we're focusing on unmet medical need, groundbreaking innovation, patient shareholder value, our product positioning, our milestones, especially important is the value creation, and then how we're going to actually operate. It goes through a multiple stage process, which you call C to B to A, and then we do a series A financing, B financing. So it goes down and then back up. We launch about 2 to 4 companies a year, and really this is an important process. I think the take-home message here is that traditionally we spend 10,000 to 20,000 person hours, for each of these companies before they actually launch. That's a significant capital allocation of resources. How can we actually improve this? By leveraging data systems, and technologies. Now, when we build these sustainable companies, we have a support networks. Not as sophisticated as some of the larger firms like Flagship, but these companies, as they're launching, they get finance support, communication support, legal support, platform support, because platforms are a bad word in the venture capital industry, particularly if you're focusing on drugs right now. Help with recruiting, a forum to get us all together like we are today, we call Beyond Great, as well as we have board roles, and then we have a business development team to help you partner, right? So we're trying to build something that is sustainable. Now within that platform infrastructure, because that was Third Rock, I'm going to tell you about our platform team within Third Rock. It's composed of IT, what we're calling Orca, which I am, probably one of the more high contributors to Orca, and then platform operations, where we think about how we manage, store, protect our information, how we think about early research through development, and then how do we take these systems and push them out into a brand new entity that no longer cohabitates with us in our little system, in our little ecosystem. So I'm going to first focus on Orca because everybody in here is an IT expert, and I don't want to tell you anything about that because I'll look like a complete fool. So I'll talk about Orca. So Orca is our method for operationalizing research through centralized access. These are tools and technologies that we develop centrally, and then we can push out to our seed companies, and in many cases, our portfolio companies. And the real goal, if I cut it down to everything, is to accelerate our value creation timeline. When does your company become more valuable? Is it when you reach a DC? Is it when you reach an IND? Is it when you get a phase 1 or phase 2B clinical readout? What do we need to do to accelerate that value creation cycle so our shares are worth more, they can raise more money successfully on the market, and then ultimately as we look to our shareholder returns. Now this starts with innovate, access, development, and then delivery or deployment. So that's how we think about it through this area. Innovation can be buy versus build, as we've heard, many things before. It's about how do you actually start and build these systems when you virtually have no data other than the public data? How do you do that? How do you innovate? And then what do you need to layer on top of it with the minimal amount of capital to accelerate your build? So we think about it in terms of scouting, vetting, and execution in our group called Orca, specifically. Now, these are just examples. I wish I could actually put up real examples, but they're kind of real examples, so I think there's something everybody can connect with. But we have 2 different focuses, data science and bench science, wet lab science. And in there, we focus on a lot on AI, ML, mostly ML until recently. Now it's AI, ML, because it actually can pass a Turing test. So we focus on a lot of different aspects of that, from modeling to simulations to predictions. And then on the bench side, what are the novel assay systems, technologies that are going to enable us to make that next best decision to move these programs forward? Then we have a team that does the assessment, That's internal and external. Harinda's been part of some of these vetting teams where we look at it and say, is this right? Yes, no, and how do we actually move forward? And then when we deploy these, our goal is to either have this be the basis of a new co, accelerate one or more of our seed companies, or to enable all of our portfolio companies in a rising tide environment where we make everybody better by lifting them up. So this is, again, modified service catalog. These are all things that when we're spinning up a company, we push buttons, and then they're available to our data scientists or our scientists to help them make decisions. These are lots of data. This is how we do high performance compute. This is where we draw on subscriptions. In a moment I'll tell you how, but these are all things that are available, literally push button. When we think about using AI, ML on top of the public resources, on top of our private resources, for which we have a lot of data that Orca generates for mining, we've deployed things, especially in literature, patent, web mining. That's where a lot of our basic research starts. How do we make decisions on the biology? We have a NUCO plan evaluation system that we've deployed. That means if we have an inbound inquiry and somebody's saying, hey, here's my NUCO, that's what goes through, and if it passes that, we'll actually look at it. Otherwise, it just says reject and we move on. But internally, when we're going to our board, our discovery committee, to present a new idea, we pass it through this filter. And this filter actually takes the position, the personalities of all of our discovery committee members, and it starts to break down what's good, what's bad, what you should fix, what questions you need to answer before you come in and actually talk to this committee. And then, of course, internal, external mining. On the comp side, we have tons of protein research to design, to optimize, to humanize, to CMC, to property predict, to developability. On the small molecule side, the standard stuff, we think we're pretty good at it, but probably not as good as many of you. Screen, dock, ADME prediction, property prediction, scaffold hopping, functional group hopping. We try to bring these to bear to minimize the amount of chemistry we need to do. And then general capabilities, coding. We don't really write a lot of novel code anymore. AI writes our code. We're looking at a lot of medical writing systems for how we do a lot of just the generation of the materials, the compiling of the data from our data rooms to create packages that we can submit. And then we do a lot of work on legal side. But let's talk about how we can connect these discrete data sources. So one thing that we've been working on quite a bit recently is kind of automation of core workflows for everybody in this process. Whether you're a physician, a biologist, an associate, a technologist like myself, starts with your retrieval. Where are you pulling this data from, and then how are you putting it together? So we start with retrieval. We add on our reasoning chains, right? This is layer one. So this gives you a thought partner. Leah, as you're playing around, it will help you think about your idea and build it out more fully, pull in literature, pull in patent, pull in things like that. We take those reasoning chains and we turn them into skills. Claude skills is a wonderful thing, but then it becomes more of a trained specialist that everybody can actually use and interact with. We take those skills and we turn them into individual or discrete agents. And these agents are now autonomous collaborators. That's what we're all trying to do here, is get better use our resources. Now, when we're thinking about this, it's all about the Human AI Alliance, right? We're seeing the emergence of what I think are some of the most valuable employees in the industry right now, and that's the scientist-engineer hybrid. That's my whole group, scientists, engineer hybrids, with few exceptions. I still have a couple architecture layers because, you can't get around that. But that is the emergence, and that's how we're looking at building these companies based on data. Like you heard before, we do all of that. Target identification, target prioritization. How do you pick an indication? How do you think about a clinical path? Is it better to go to China or Australia? All of these things are embedded in many of this logic, so we can make better decisions, put dollars to it, calculate share price along the way, and does it actually make sense to build? are we setting the milestones to proceed or kill these by leveraging minimal money to make these decisions? Now, the impact of AI, we see it, it's real. Real impact, measurable impact. But it's really uneven, right? So you see genuine speed gains, hopefully quality gains, target identification, molecule generation, clinical trial design, right? We see them here. Benchling integration, data visualization, PowerPoint presentation, daily optimization of your calendar, your meeting preps, genuine productivity gains. When we think about, moving, into other areas, right? These are our key skills that we want to have for these therapeutic companies. Now, just like you heard earlier, the gains are concentrating in the larger companies or our established companies where their foundational data infrastructure can cut through the noise. And I'll spend a minute on noise in a moment because there's a lot of noise, right? And get to the point where you're determining what is actually working, right? So again, data architecture, data core, data strategy is really key. And this is much of a data strategy overall problem as it is an AI evaluation. Who's best? Because that's the top layer. If you haven't solved the bottom, it doesn't matter what you put on top. It's not going to help you out. So that's one of the message. And then along the way, you have your trust, you have your governance, you have your talent, and you have your organization. And as I mentioned, the talent equation is being fundamentally rewritten in our industry. And that's scarce resources when you're making these build decisions, when you're making these buy decisions. When do you hire people? When do you use consultants? When do you outsource it? It really is about people who will do it the most efficient and the best way. And these are the people right now in the future that we see who bridge biology with machine learning. These are very important. And then trust and governance, when you have this set up, it's good, when these are explainable, when they can get regulatory acceptance, when you have scientific credibility, which is absolutely key early on, that's when you can actually move forward. Until then, they're a giant bottleneck for you. Now I want to focus on the noise just for a minute because this is just unbelievable. All I did was ask Claude to plot me the growth of archive papers in AI or ML. And you can see, again, 2.7x increase in 5 years in machine learning with a 52% jump in 1 year in artificial intelligence. So that means you or a team as scientists, how do you read 60,000 papers in 1 year? Well, the answer is pretty clear, hopefully, from the beginning of my talk. But the other thing is you're talking to vendors, and I love the vendors. I've worked with many or all of the vendors in this room and in the show. Fantastically smart people. So this doesn't apply to them. But start looking at what's being claimed. We have an instant differentiator. We're trusted AI. We have the highest benchmark scores. We're cutting edge. We're truly enabling. How do you get through all of this noise? There's just so much of it. Now, having said that, when you think about that talent gap opportunity, one thing that was very scary, in my wife's industry and, my friend's industry is they said, I'm going to be replaced by humans. We're going to replace by AI. And you see all these graphs. This one's over here from the the Stanford Index, and you see AI performance on demanding benchmark continues to improve, where AI is approaching the intelligence of a human. I'm going to lose my job. Well, there's two different answers to that. One is verifier's rule. If your job can be instantly validated with an answer, that's verifier's rule. Your job's going to go away. In drug development, drug discovery, you don't get your answer for 5, 10, 15 years. So when is AI going to eat or beat pharma? Not for a long time, if ever, right? And it's because that human intelligence, which comes back to the graph on the left-hand side? Left makes the L, okay. Left-hand side of the graph, right, which I think is a more relevant benchmark. And that really is the human, basically, wow. need to look at my notes because in my process I am not remembering the actual name of this test, but the humanities last exam. Thank you, Kevin. Humanities last exam. When you actually look at the benchmarks of humanities last exam, you see that the best AI systems are 25, 28% of human cognitive intelligence. Then one of the main reasons is reasoning is great, but they haven't really incorporated Bayesian reasoning. You can do Bayesian math, but it's not incorporating Bayesian reasoning into the build and their decision process, and that's why human logic is really needed, right? Until we have an AI native biology stack that can do all different sorts of cognitive reasoning, we're gonna need humans, smart ones at that. So now we think about, okay, it's really exciting. There's a changing landscape. Everybody, is super excited. There's a ton of hype. How do we get past hype? Well, today we're at hype, pilots, probabilistic, property prediction, probabilistic, generative AI for design, it's probabilistic, right? The other thing we see, everybody has a model. Every model is revolutionary, but what actually works? And then you think about where you want to be. We want to be engineering, validated, integrated. We want reproducible. We want deployable. But what exists is the opportunity for everybody in this room and the industry at large. It is the chasm in a different way. What are the true benchmarks? How do we actually benchmark all of this stuff? Even if you have the right foundational layers, your data, your data represented the right way. Where's the novel data? If you're selling a new ASI, where's the novel data? If you're selling a new protein design or small molecule or RNA design or CRISPR design, where's the novel data? If you're using all the public data, I'm sorry, it's not gonna be super transformative. Where is the AI native biology stack? At the end of the day, does AI absorb pharma or does pharma just absorb AI? Today, pharma is absorbing AI at a faster clip. You've seen the numbers on it. It's an incredible amount of money spent. Will AI ever absorb pharma? I don't think so, or at least not in my lifetime. But I'm really excited about what's going on in the industry. It's transformed my thinking. It's transforming our firm. I think it's transitioning to a new model, a new way of thinking, and especially a new way of creating companies. So I want to thank you for listening to a fly speck who goes from 0 to 1 rather than the really exciting talks about data interpretation, manipulation, and structure. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Great talk. So you talked a lot about kind of putting in place, you took a lot of time to put in place internal processes that you felt were like very robust for doing the business that you do. What is your framework for understanding, knowing when to evolve or change that framework and that process that you've put in place? You've had a lot of success with it, but how are you going to know in the future when and how you need to change it?
So it's a great question, and I have about 26 different answers to it. So no, I'm kidding. I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And I think the first thing I'll say is we have the opportunity to completely change it and transform it with every new company, right? How we operate as the venture firm is different from how every individual company launches and adopts these technology. Everything we create is an option, but not a requirement. New teams come on and they say, we don't like what you did here, we're going with CDD, we're going with Dotmatics, or they make their own decisions. So at the firm, we're all constantly changing, constantly evolving. And so I would say, even though we're using core infrastructure, we're always evolving. Where do we get new data? How do we access this? Where do we do competitive intelligence? How do we operate? How do we make better decisions given the macroeconomics? So I would say our foundation is the same, but we change our method of operation quite a bit. Stunned silence. Either that or that was the worst talk of the day, so, oh, okay.
Yeah, I had a question about, you mentioned the relevance of novel data. So as you're within the paradigm that you're building, you're supplying tools and data to companies. Do you also incorporate into agreements that they share back data to help build those models?
We don't actually.
You don't?
And
Okay.
it's a great question. As our centralized group, we don't. When companies fail, we ingest and we eat that data, which happens a lot. So we try to learn from our failures. When a company launches, that company is independent, operational, with their own legal strategy, framework, IP strategy to do what they need to do to operate successfully.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Kevin, thank you very much for the talk. You talked about the human factor, right? So there's a lot of noise right now in the industry of companies implementing AI, but also reducing their workforce. A lot of folks are being replaced, and there's a train of thought that they should actually be keeping these folks, the knowledge that they have, so they can create more opportunities and leverage this AI technology. So the question is there still a value proposition for companies to implement AI, but not necessarily at the taking so many people off their books?
It's a great question, because I think that my general answer is yes. You want to make the human scientists, the human business people, the human operators, the human executives better. And I think that that comes with AI. In terms of maintaining your staff, as long as they have flexibility and they can do different things, to move from a scientist to a CMC expert or manufacturing expert or commercialization expert or medical, as long as they have flexibility to move, particularly in the company creation process, you think about it, you develop some assets. By the time those assets reach the clinic, you don't have enough money and value to raise a ton of money. So you have to reduce what you're doing in discovery to support your clinical operations, to raise the money successfully to get back to discovery operations. So you build your pipeline. And so in those cases, that becomes very difficult to maintain just because of, again, the capital allocation in this industry. But I believe in many of the big companies, they would benefit, particularly in this human AI partnerships, even if the person's regular function isn't going, but they use this hybrid AI human system, then they can go into different groups and effectively be that champion that Mike spoke of especially, to help get them to use it, adopt it, customize it for their applications.
So one of the things that I found interesting that you mentioned, your team is all scientist, engineer, hybrids, and I was reflecting, I think probably most people of the audience in this room sees themselves as some level of bilingual between science and a technology thing. So I do think that that's a skill that's becoming more and more important. But do you see a role for kind of agentic AI to help accelerate that in an individual to get those additional skills, or do you think we're not ready for that?
That's a great question. In the hallway, I was just saying how I always have my system up and running so I can say, oh, we're in this chemistry organization. What is this? What does this mean? And it's, oh, that's an isobutyl with this charge, and that's why it's not looking right here. And so I use that every time, right? Because my team and like many of the groups, you're building these systems for so many diverse sets of questions and answers and skills and scientific disciplines, and when to introduce physical AI or when to, and how to get data back from. So you need a lot of different skills. So that's where we're trying to use that to make people more versatile with those systems. So long answer, yes.
Yeah, super stuff. Kevin, thanks. Could you talk a little bit more, if you're allowed to, about where you put the data? So you were talking about ingestion of data from companies that fail, or ingestion of data externally. Because of the things that we talked about this morning, we had knowledge graphs, we've had data foundational data models and stuff like that. Could you talk a little bit about that?
We are primarily, but not exclusively, a cloud organization. Amazon is our cloud partner. We co-developed the biotech blueprint, and So that is something that we use for a large part of our data and a large part of our high performance compute. But then we also have data in Ignite, usually in the form of PowerPoints, contracts, things like that, and even some in SharePoint. But where it is, as long as it's in the right format, structure, however you want to think about that, right? We can access it, again, and that was to my slide, MCP servers, right? So we just write MCP servers to actually go and retrieve it, and then we have instructions for what you're retrieving, how to report it back in the most effective way, given who's operating that particular system. Please.
Behind that, so that's a query based on you want to find something maybe, or
Yep.
Once it's in your, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
your environment, you have something that can go and find and pull out information. Are you then distilling that information into something like a knowledge graph, or something that you're going to say, this is our consumable data to do other things on that data?
Yes. Yes, you're exactly right. In some cases, we're generating a report. In some cases, we're generating a bit of knowledge to actually go and do more sophisticated analysis. In some cases, we are actually putting that data into a combination with other sources to actually do some novel machine learning on that data. So I would say it's case dependent. Am I thinking about that right? Yes, it's case dependent, in each of these individual cases. But, part of this, my team especially, we operate in many cases as data concierges. We're the people you go to when you run this report and you say, how do I do this? How do I do that? So we help a lot of people just through that process. And in many times they become fully independent after that. But that's where we could deploy knowledge graphs, or use of a GAN or CNN to do X, Y, or Z, or using something for property prediction or bioavailability, whatever happens, QSP modeling, genetics, GWAS analysis. So data concierge, yeah. It is, because it does come down to how you were trained, and do you have the right culture around you to actually start to utilize these systems, or are you going to go to the library and pull out a book, or are you going to read that whole PubMed article versus having it summarize the most important points for what you're trying to query it for?
So